We are live now.
We are live now.
Yes.
Hello everyone. Good evening.
Hello everyone.
RSMDACC Dharampet Arts and Commerce College
RSMDACC Dharampet
welcomes you
Arts and
all to
Commerce
this
College
certificate course
welcomes you
in
all to
creative
this
writing.
certificate course in creative
Friends,
writing.
poetry
Friends,
is
poetry
when
is
an
when
emotion
an
has
emotion
found
has
its
found
thought
its thought
and the
and
thought
the thought
has found
has found
words.
words.
What makes
What
you a
makes you
poet
a poet
is a gift
is a
for
gift
language,
for
an
language,
ability to
an
see
ability
into the
to
heart of
see into
things,
the heart of
and
things,
an ability
and
to
an
deal with
ability to
important
deal with
unconscious
important
material.
unconscious
When all
material.
these things come
When all
together,
these things come
you are a
together,
poet.
you are a poet.
But
But
there
there
isn't
isn't
one little
one
gimmick
little gimmick
that makes
that
you a
makes you a
poet.
poet.
There isn't
There
a
isn't a
formula
formula
for it.
for it.
Yes,
Yes,
let us
let us
know
know
more about this
this
from
from
an
an
established,
established,
internationally acclaimed poet,
poet,
Dr. Ranjana Sharon Sinha.
Sharon Sinha.
Dr. Ranjana Sharon Sinha
Dr. Ranjana
is a poet, author, and professor of English. She is a prominent voice in contemporary Indian poetry in English with international recognition. She has received a number of awards for her contribution to literature, along with a commendation from the former President of India, APJ Abdul Kalam, for her poem Mother Nature, contained in her collection Spring Zone. Her recent award is a citation of brightest honor by International Sufi Center, Bangalore. Her poems are part of the syllabus prescribed for MA English, 4th semester, Pune University, Purnia. Her poems have been translated into German, Greek, Russian, Persian, Albanian, Nepali, and Hindi languages. Authored and published 8 books in different genres and 50 research papers. She has widely published at national and international levels, both in print and online. She is associated with many literary organizations and poetry groups. She is one of the members of the editorial board, our Poetry Archive. On behalf of Dharampet Arts and Commerce College, I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Ma'am,
Dr. Manjushri.
First of all, poets are really very emotional as they translate their emotions into poems. So are you also a very sensitive and very emotional person? And do you think you should be touched by an incident before you can write on it, or you can write objectively and professionally too?
Thank you, Manju ma'am. Well, I'm slightly sensitive and emotional, and perhaps this is why I am a poet. Right from my childhood, I used to think a lot. I used to think about each and every incident happening in my family or in my vicinity. I still remember that I cried hell of a lot when my pet Glory died. Whenever some incident of death took place, it touched me a lot. And I sometimes cried, sometimes I felt right going somewhere else. But as I grew up, my sensitivity took a broader form. I started thinking in a broader perspective. And of course, the emotion and sensitivity were always there, but
Yes.
it came in a broader form. I concentrated more on the women's plight, the plight of downtrodden, and I wrote on these subjects. Yes, the personal touch is always there, but sometimes you have to be objective and professional also in your approach. Suppose you are going to send poetry or your poems to some anthology and they just give you a theme although you are not interested in that particular theme, then what happens? You have to write in an more or less in an objective manner and become very professional in your approach. But I do believe that in poetry, personal and emotional touch is always there.
Yes. Ma'am, do you belong to Nagpur?
Ma'am, do you belong to Nagpur?
Basically, I hail from Bihar,
Huh?
Huh?
and my education has been done in different parts of
Mm-hmm.
Bihar. My father was a doctor, he was an orthopedic surgeon in government service, and so he was transferred after every 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And so naturally, we kept moving with him from place to place and
Mm-hmm.
got admission in different schools. But we were lucky enough to get good English medium schools in all those places. Well, my college education have also been completed from Bihar, Baba
Oh.
Saheb Ambedkar Bihar University. I have done my BA, MA, and PhD. First of all, when I entered my university, I did my English honors, BA English honors, because until and unless in our university you do an honors course in graduation in a particular subject, you are not entitled for admission to PG course. So I did my English honors, and after that, I completed my MA and PhD, and I was lucky enough to get a first class in my MA. And I
Wow.
did PhD
Congratulations.
after
Wow,
Yeah.
my.
congratulations.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And the subject of my PhD was Shri Aurobindo and the Epic Tradition.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes. And
And
ma'am, what are
ma'am,
your
what are
hobbies
your
and
hobbies and
interests?
interests?
Well, my interest is vast, and I have got different types of hobbies. In a way, I'm interested in each and everything of life. In a way, you can
Yes.
say.
Yes.
I'm interested, first of all, I'm interested in reading.
Oh.
And the reading habit in us was inculcated by my father himself.
Mm-hmm.
Although he was a doctor, he was very much
Mm-hmm.
interested in literature and other books also.
Uh-huh.
So we had got a small library, just a home library, and we had got different types of book in that library, which my father and elder brother used to procure. So I used to read, even in my childhood, I used to read different types of English books. And even today, that habit has remained with me. I'm interested in reading, I'm interested in cooking, I'm interested in housekeeping also. And my hobby is gardening. I'm very much interested in plants, trees, flowers. Unfortunately, ever since I shifted to the flat, I don't have much space for gardening. But still, I love gardening. Well, I have also got a passion for driving. Still, I
Oh.
drive. I love to go on long drives.
Oh.
So, my interests are uh, very much
Yes. Ma'am, you have
Ma'am, you have
retired now,
retired now,
and you are a
and
very
you are a very
senior and
senior and
experienced person.
experienced
But
person.
how is life according to you?
But how is life according to you?
See, I'll say life is just a small four-lettered word, but it has vast connotations. Life is different things for different people. But I think life is a gift of God and we should not waste it. We must do something in our life memorable. Now, the memorable depends on so many things. But personally, I feel you must do something good for others. Again, here, I would like to give reference of my father who was a doctor, an orthopedic surgeon. He used to treat many patients with free of cost. He used to operate free of cost. So, and we must do that. That is in my underprivileged persons who are extending their hands towards us for our help. So, in our life, we must do good for others. Second thing I would like to say that every phase of life has got its own importance. When we are child, we are dependent on our parents. When we slightly grow up, we go to school and we want that our child we should get good marks. After that, when we get married, besides our career, besides our uh, educational career or whatever career we are pursuing, there is lots of responsibility on our shoulders, and we must try to own that responsibility. So, uh, responsibility, career, everything should go side by side. And when
Yes.
you retire, well, when you begin the second inning of your life, you are, I think, that free to devote much time on you. For example, I could not write as much as I wished when I was in service. But these days, I'm totally into creativity. I can devote much time to my creativity. So every thing or every inning of life has got its own
Yes.
importance.
Well said, ma'am.
Yes. Well
And
said, ma'am.
ma'am, poetry
And
is a mirror
ma'am,
which
poetry is
makes
a mirror
beautiful
which
that
makes
which
beautiful
is
that
distorted.
which is
So,
distorted.
what do you say about this?
So, what do you say about this?
Yes, I do feel that poetry is a magic glass. It is a myriad thing, myriad beautiful thing, just like God. See, when a poet starts writing, he writes on so many subjects. Sometimes the subject is good, sometimes bad, sometimes beautiful, sometimes ugly. But when the poets start writing, he turns even ugly thing into a thing beautiful. I think like God and eternity, the word ugly does not exist in the realm of poetry. I would like to add that, like God, poetry also is Satyam, Shivam, and Sundaram.
Yes.
Yes.
Ma'am, genius is the power
Ma'am,
of a new
genius is the power of
individuality,
expressing a new individuality,
isn't it?
isn't it?
Yes, uh,
Even in
usually
creative writing,
genius is
yes, the
associated
genius
with,
Even
is
in creative writing, yes,
expressing your
the genius is
individuality, isn't it?
expressing your individuality, isn't it?
yeah, I do feel that you have to be individual in approach. In creative writing, in writing poetry, you have to be individual. Never think about others, what people will say of your creation. Well, your individuality should get priority over everything else. And who knows, when you start expressing in an individual and original way, that becomes a piece of real art and work. There are many poets who were beyond their age, who did not write according to his age. We can take the example of William Blake. He started writing in the fag end of classical age. At that time also, there was some strain of classical age. The romantic age had not yet begun. But here was a man of genius, full of individuality, who we can say we don't have any comparison in literature. Especially, I'm a great fan of
Blake.
William
Blake.
Blake, you know. So he was a visionary and he started writing in his own way. So,
Yes. Yeah.
individuality and originality does count in literature and creative writing. You should not be a copycat. That's what I feel.
Yes. And ma'am,
Yes.
now let us
And
move towards your
ma'am, now
creative
let us
writing.
move towards your
So,
creative
when
writing.
did you start
So, when
writing?
did you start
And what
writing?
do you write
And
about?
what do you
Generally,
write
what are
about?
your
Generally, what are
themes?
your themes?
First, when did you
First, when
start
did you start
writing?
writing?
Well, I don't remember when I started writing actually, but right from the very beginning, I was very much interested in poetry. Even during my early school days, poetry gave me great pleasure. I used to recite poetry from my textbooks, whether it was of Hindi or of English, and that gave me great pleasure. Sometimes, even during my study hours, I used to take the poetry book and recite. Yes, I remember that at that time also, although I did not write anything like poem or poetry, but in my childhood, I used to participate in caption writing. I used to participate in writing caption for children's magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
got good response also. After that, when I came to college, I wrote just a few poems, and that got published in my college magazine. And I was very happy that two of my poems have been published in my college magazine. And after that, there were no serious writing, no writing from my side except for smattering of a few poems. But when after my marriage, uh, I I completed my PhD, then writing came to me. I started writing. I think that even during my childhood, the poet was somewhere in the periphery that came after my marriage. I started writing poems, short stories, and my sister, Dr. Ranjana Verma, who is the poet and professor of Hindi, she knew that I was into writing and poetry. She encouraged me a lot. And she told me that, well, you should send your poems to some good journals. And she took my poems and she sent it to a very good national and national journal. It was a national journal. And I got published. And after that, I got so much encouraged that I started writing. I went on writing poetry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
from 1990 onwards, I wrote a number of poems and I got published widely. I got uh, good responses from publishing houses also. And with the new millennium, things really came with a bang. I published my anthologies, collection of poems, and after that, there were no looking back by my own writing. And that was the starting and beginning of my writing career.
Yes. And
Yes.
what do you
And
generally
what do you
write
generally
about?
write about?
See, in the beginning, I have written
Yes,
in
ma'am.
the beginning. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yes. Okay. In the beginning, I wrote fiction also. I have written many short story also, but poems were my priority. And after a few years, I completely switched over to poems.
Okay.
I have written poems on love. I have written poems on nature. I have written poems on downtrodden and poor people. And I have also written poems on aging and time. So there is no dearth of subject for writing poems. Even my pet and my domestic helps are the subject of my writing and poem.
Yeah. And now, ma'am, can we talk about your poem, Mother Nature, which was appreciated by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam?
Yes. See, see, this is the anthology of poem, Spring Zone. Is it
Uh,
visible?
yes, yes.
Yes. This is
Raise
the
a little bit
anthology of
higher.
poem.
Huh. Yes, yes. Huh.
This
Yes,
is
now.
the
Yes. Huh.
collection. It's Spring Zone. And although I got appreciation for most of the poems in this volume, but Mother Nature, Abdul Kalam sir wrote me that I liked your poem Mother Nature best. So it's a very simple poem, but it is inspiring. So I would like to read. Should
Yes,
I
yes.
read a few
Yes,
lines
yes,
from
yes.
it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The title is Mother Nature. Let us find time to stand and stare the precious gifts of bountiful nature. The orange orb ascending the sky encourage us to rise high. The azure sky, open and vast, sends the message to enlarge our heart. The majestic mountains, firm and serene, tell us what does fortitude mean. The emerald trees, yielding fruits and shade, reveal the noble purpose for which man was made. Look around and feel the magic of Mother Nature, whose benign lap gives solace to every creature. Join hands in maintaining her balance to foster harmony and man's progress.
Yes.
This is it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Really. No wonder he appreciated this poem. Yes. And he was also very connected to Mother Nature. Yes.
Yeah.
And, ma'am, you have been
Yes.
teaching English. Um, what should be done to inculcate creative writing in students?
Yes. I would say, first of all, the students must have at least some interest in creative writing. Without interest, they cannot go far, I'm sure. But only interest is not enough. Our part is to encourage them, inspire them. We can give them some topics to write, whether it is short creative writing or some title poem. We can even provide title to them. In the beginning, we can give title that, well, on this theme, on this title, you have to write a few lines, like something like poetry.
Yes.
Then they should be encouraged to attend poetry workshops, which is getting popular these days. They should also attend the poetry session or any online poetry session. Online poetry sessions have become very popular these days,
Yes.
and and the students can avail those things. And we as teachers can encourage them encourage them and inspire them.
Yes. Ma'am, and how did you reach the international audience? Please tell us about how you published your poems and tell us about your
Yeah,
publishers also. Yeah. And how did you reach the
yes.
international audience?
First of all, I would say that I have been a member of different poetry groups which is international. I have been also moderator of these groups. I have been posting and writing poetry for these groups, and my poetry and poems were appreciated. Then only they made me their moderator. There
Yes.
is fantasy group of Wordsworth poetry. That is very big group. I am moderator of that group, and my poems have been translated into Chinese and all by
Yes.
that group only. And through that group, I came with contact with international poets. Some were professors, some are renowned poets. And in this way, I got a chance to get a wider audience for my poetry. These
Yeah.
very groups sometimes publish anthology. There are some journals also which they publish. So I got an access to all those journals, anthologies, and I would say that first of all they see I have to post poems, and then they publish in their anthology. Their anthologies are online, their anthologies are in print also. There are Inner Child Press anthology in which I have been published. So, through the different poetry groups, I got an access to international audience.
And many of your poems have been translated, you said. So, can you tell us some of the
Yeah,
poems which are largely translated? Yes, in many languages.
yes, yeah. First of all, I would like to tell you that my poem, She's Gone Forever,
Huh?
which I have written on aging after my retirement, after
Mm-hmm.
60. After 60, I felt that the age was telling upon me. And that was such a, I can say, that was such a feeling I cannot express you. So I wrote poem on aging, and that is prescribed for MA fourth semester. She's gone forever.
Oh,
That has been translated into German and Hindi also. The a German, yeah, she's a professor and poet also. She's a German professor. She has translated my poem, She's Gone Forever, into German, and it has been published in some good journal also, translated and then published. Well, I would
great.
like to read just a few lines from my
Yes,
poem.
yes.
She's Gone Forever. It has been prescribed also. In my journey through life, in my journey through life, I reach an alien territory. The scarlet gulmohars, with their flamboyant flames, fall on the ground. A sense of fall silently comes. Behind the morphing face and body, I look for my lost self, a woman without lines or signs of aging, vibrant and agile, appears before me. I try to loop my arms through hers, but she flies and goes forever, making me feel like a mass of rocks after recent rainfall. Oh, the pleasant petrichor persists. Okay?
Beautiful, ma'am. Beautiful. Yes,
Should I read
wonderful.
the last stanza?
Yes, yes,
Just
go ahead.
three.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, yes.
Yeah. The last stanza of the same poem. My bygone days, like pale effervescent champagne, hiss in the flute of my advancing years, whispering something with the mesmerizing bubbles.
Wow. Yes. Beautiful. That was really wonderful. No doubt they were translated, and this lady, German lady, she liked it and she translated it in German. So, and it is like we are really fortunate, ma'am, to have such a distinguished personality amidst us here today. Madam, what is your message for this budding writers who are listening to you? All these people who are participating in this program, what is your small
Well,
message for the creative writers?
a very small message for all the creative writers is, first of all, you should be interested in creative writing. Number two, first, write for yourself. Don't bother much for publishing and all. Because when you write some matter of stuff, when your stuff is good, naturally it will receive audience and you will be published. So you can choose any topic, any subject, and go for it with your originality and individuality and be positive.
Thank you so much,
That's
ma'am.
all I can say to them.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mandu.
Yes. And now over to your poetry writing session. Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. A very, very happy new year to all of you. Today, I'll focus on poetry writing and try to cover the different steps to write poetry. But before that, just a few words about poetry. Poetry is a form of literature that is as concrete as life itself and yet as abstract as music. In simple words, we can say that poetry is a literary work in which we find intensity of emotions. I too feel emotion is necessary for poetry. The poet does this by carefully choosing and arranging language for its meaning, sound, and rhythm. It will be no exaggeration if I add that poetry is reserved for expressing something in an artistic way. The language of poetry tends to be more expressive and spatial. Even you can say decorative. Well, you will be surprised to know that written poetry has a history of 4,300 years, and the roots of poetry goes even further into the past when, you know, literature had not yet evolved and poetry was passed down in oral tradition. During its long history, poetry has undergone tremendous changes in terms of language, style, and form. From the age of Shakespeare up to the modern age, trends in poetry have changed much. The 20th century saw a lot of push against formal structure of poetry. Poetry has not lost an universality even during modern age. Its form has changed, no doubt. Modern age poetry has become more innovative and is no longer limited to rhyming pattern and meters. Here you can say there is much scope in poetry writing because when you write poetry in modern times, you can go for a poetry that has no rhyme, that has no meter, and hence it becomes easier for you to write and adopt. Well, it is said that poets are born, not made. That ability to write poetry is an inborn gift, and that poetry is not a thing to be taught or learned. Yes, it's true to some extent. Poetry, I feel, is visceral and relates to deep inward feelings. Everyone cannot see a thing and experience the way a poet does. William Blake, a seminal figure in the history of poetry and visual writing and arts, said, every eye sees differently. As the eye, such the object. The tree which moves some to tears of joy is in the eyes of others only a green thing lying in the way. A poem, in fact, is not just rhymed verses connected by some idea. It is a piece of art that is born out of the bottom of your heart. But this should not discourage you from learning and writing poetry. If a person has inclination, even slight inclination, to write and learn poetry, it can definitely be stimulated, developed, and brought to fruition by practice and labor over time and experience. Well, every age adds something new to the definition and scope of poetry. Although the basics of poetry remains more or less the same. So, let us begin by discussing the different steps of writing poetry. All of us know that there are no officially sanctioned rules for poetry. We cannot tie up poetry to a set of hard and fast rules. But still, certain guidelines can definitely help you knowing the basics of poetry, and then by practice you can write poetry or even master the art of writing poetry. Well, what are the steps you should follow while writing poem? Number 1, subject. The first thing to decide in poetry writing is the subject of your poem. What are you going to write about? It is best to choose a subject according to your own mood, temperament, and passion. The topic of the poem may be subjective or objective. Subjective poems, we know, are the outcome of your thoughts, feelings, experiences, emotions, and imagination, while subject matter of the objective poem is the outcome of events and things around you. The subject of your poem may be love, loss, relationships, betrayal, death, nature, and many more. You can write about social issues or social injustice too. Poems can be written on war or peace. Subjects for poetry writing, I must say, are the outcome of real everyday happenings or experiences. You don't have to search. Everything you experience, everything you see, touch, feel, and everything around you can give you an inspiration to write and, of course, provide a bunch of topics. But always choose a subject that you love and enjoy. Without interest, you cannot go far, I am sure. Well, you should not bother much about the current trends and happenings in publishing world. I would like to share the words of T.S. Eliot, who said, "Don't write first for anyone, but for yourself." Yes, you must learn to enjoy your creativity. In our day to day life, we experience many things personally, or there are social issues to which we react emotionally. We human beings are capable of great emotions. You may capture such moments in your life by putting them on a notepad. When you feel like writing, you can connect all dots, make an outline, and prepare a rough draft first. After that, develop it with your imagination. Color it with beautiful and suggestive words that reach deep into the hearts of your readers. Well, if you ask me, I have written poems on so many subjects. I have written on nature and its beauty. I have written on love, on death, on relationships, on childhood memories, and on nostalgia. I have also written on the process of aging, on which we mortals have no hold, and on time that is all powerful. My pets and my domestic help are also the subject of my poetry writing. Coming to social issues, the world of poor and downtrodden and injustice inflicted on women are the subject that compelled me to write poems. So, I can say that there is no dearth of subjects for writing poetry. You can try any subject for your poem. Number two, a structure and form. After choosing subject, the next thing to consider is the form of poetry. Form is the physical structure of poetry. It refers to the way a poem is presented to the reader. It could include the line length, a stanza format, the rhyme, and the rhythm. Well, what is the difference between Rhyme and rhythm. Rhyme is the matching up of sounds and syllables, usually at the end of a line. For example, fry, cry, thing, king, and so on. Rhyme keeps a poem flowing in perfect harmony. Rhythm, on the other hand, is the pattern of language in a poem. It is created by the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. A stanza, you must be knowing, is a group of lines in a poem similar to a paragraph in a prose piece. If you're writing in a classical or standard form, the lines and the length of the poem is restricted by the rules of that particular form. For example, if you choose to write a sonnet, you will have to compose a 14-line poem with a specific rhyme scheme. There was a time when poetry was written according to fairly strict rules of meter and rhyme. It was compulsory for poets to follow certain rules while writing poetry. Without those rules, no poetry could be written in those days. Although the classical forms are widely used even today, modern poets have mostly done away with those rules. Now, the poets mostly use free verse for their poems. Now, what is free verse? Free verse is a literary device that is free from limitations of regular meter or rhyme, and free verse is much easier to follow in your poems. It does not rhyme with fixed meters. It does not have a fixed form. You have the freedom to choose a stanza form, line breaks, and much more. Now it's up to you what type of poem you want to write. Besides other form, you can also try a haiku or a tanka. Both are Japanese form of poetry getting popular in modern times. Haiku is a poem of only 3 lines with total 17 syllables. In the first line, there are 5 syllables. In the second line, there are 7 syllables. And again, in the third line, there are 5 syllables. Lines in a haiku don't have to rhyme. I will give 2 examples of my haiku. Ruby red palash with topaz like amaltash adorns the summer. Another example, these soulless houses sell like housing colonies, graves of the green fields. Like haiku, Tanka is also a very short and simple form of poetry. It consists of 31 syllables formatted over 5 lines. You can say that in Tanka, we add 2 more lines to haiku. The syllable structure of Tanka is 5 7 5 7 7. There should be no capitalization and punctuation in a tanka. I quote two of my tankas. Iconic morning, low unblocks her abundance. The world is swept off as she pouts her sun-red lips. Love leaps out like a dolphin. My next tanka, cool crawl of blue waves. The shore sustains vibrations. A flood of curled shells. Wistful wisps of sad moments lean on the sandy shoulders. In the first tanka, the beauty of morning is depicted, while in the second one, sea waves touching the shores have been associated with some sad moments of life. In the present time, many poets have written ghazal in English. Writing ghazal in English is also getting popular day by day in modern times. So you can also try ghazal if you become confident in counting syllables. Because in English ghazal, syllable is of utmost importance. A traditional ghazal consists of 5 to 15 couplets or sher. Each line contains the same number of syllables. The second line of all the couplets must end with the same word. The repeating of common words is called radif of ghazal. Radif is preceded by kafiya. Kafiya is the rhyming pattern of words. I would give example of a few couplets from my ghazal, which has 12 syllables in each line. Drinking from the goblet of memory all night, drinking from the goblet of memory all night. Awake I was with echoes binary all night. In the sky, the crescent moon knew that it would die. In the sky, the crescent moon knew that it would die. Hunted by clouds, it cried with Emery all night. I thought about the mire of a moonless night. I thought about the mire of a moonless dark night. Like dying moon, I was in misery all night. Somewhere in silent darkness hung a faint, thin hope. Somewhere in silent darkness hung a faint, thin hope. My butterfly wings remained fluttery all night. So, in this example of my ghazal, all night is radif of the ghazal, and the rhyming words memory, binary, misery, etc. are kafiya. Now, number 3, emotion. Now we come to the third important aspect of poetry, that is emotion. Well, despite differences of opinion about the place of emotion in poetry, emotion remains the basis of poetry. Let us remember William Wordsworth's famous definition of poetry that has remained popular in the world of poetry down the ages. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin in the form of emotions recollected in tranquility. Even for a poet as intellectual as Robert Frost, poetry at its base is emotion. Frost said, poetry is when an emotion has found its thought, and thought has found emotion. Hence, poetry is born with ideas, nourished and gutted with emotion. Without emotion, poetry becomes as dull as a prose piece. Well, try to evoke emotions in your poem by the employment of the senses. There are 7 basic emotions: joy, sadness, surprise, anger, disgust, contempt, and fear. We human beings are capable of great emotions, aren't we? We all have this abundance of raw material. If only we could harness it. Excavate your feelings and shape them into poetry. You must capture emotions, experience in a significant event. In reality, our feelings may be concealed even from ourselves. It may be within our untouched memories. They may be tugging at us below consciousness. William Wordsworth, the great romantic poet, saw beautiful daffodils during his walk, and the flowers filled his heart with joy. Later on, he captured the emotion of joy in his famous poem, Daffodils. Such beautiful lines created out of sheer emotion of joy. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beautiful. Here in Wordsworth's poem, we find an emotion of joy, but the same daffodils, the same flowers, fill the heart of another poet named Robert Herrick with sadness in his poem Two Daffodils. Robert Herrick weeps to see them because the flowers bloom for such a short period of time. The poet, after seeing those beautiful flowers, is reminded of the transitoriness of human life. Fair daffodils, we weep to see you haste away so soon, and yet the early rising sun has not attained his noon. So, the emotions in a poem can be of joy or of sadness. They have to be captured and evoked in the poems. At this point, I would like to share my personal experience. One fine morning in the month of March, during my long drive on highway, I saw beautiful blossoms of jacaranda along the roadside. The riotous purple flame and the magnetism of velvety violets filled me with joy and fired my imagination. My poem, The Purple Jacaranda, that became the title of my anthology later on, is the outcome of these emotions. I would love to quote a few lines from my poem, The Purple Jacaranda. The jacaranda into blossoms, the jacaranda into blossoms, lining the broad pathway, amid green foliage awesome, in a mauve magenta array. The leaves and the flowers, the leaves and the flowers create a dreamy blue heaven. Comes imagination in showers, a wealth to the flower maven. The amethyst tanzanite petals, the amethyst tanzanite petals, gorgeous in purple profusion, the jade eyes of feathery leaves, all wonders of God's creation. In this poem, I have tried to evoke the emotions of joy through the metaphors of semi precious stones like amethyst, tanzanite, and jade that convey the brightness of the flowers and leaves that I happened to see that fine morning. Sad moments in life or sad events around you create sad emotions, and sad poems, like sad songs, have their own appeal. Sad moments combined with other elements of poetry can create powerful poetry. My poem, The Grey Horizon, that I wrote after the death of my father, depicting the gloomy moment of Asthi Visarjan, is full of melancholy emotion. I think you know what Asthi Visarjan is. I come to Banaras, I come to Banaras on the bank of the Ganges with an urn in my hands containing your mortal remains. My siblings and I, with tear stained faces, stand motionless in a world of sorrow. High in the sky reach lamentations. High in the sky reach lamentations. The boatman's song is sad. The river remains ready for sessions. The oar touches water cool. Number 4, imagery. The next step in poetry writing is imagery. Well, using imagery is very important to evoke emotions in poetry. Through imagery, the poet is able to paint a picture with words. Imagery provides mental snapshots and evoke sensory experience in the readers. The experience of sight, sound, smell, taste, etc. It makes abstract emotions seem concrete and tangible to the reader and conjures up the feelings the poet wants to express. Whether it is the classical sonnet of Shakespeare or some other poem of modern poets, imagery definitely beautifies and intensifies a poetic work. Therefore, explain your subject and ideas with the help of imagery so that you can connect with your readers, that they can feel the beauty of your poem. Now, how to create images? How you can create images in your poems? Well, images are created by the use of figures of speech like simile, metaphors, personification, and onomatopoeia. Simile is a direct comparison between two things, while a metaphor is an implied simile. When we say, she is like an angel, we use simile. But when we say, she is an angel, we use metaphor. Personification is created in the poetry when human attributes are given to non human things. Onomatopoeia is a word that mimics the natural sound of things. Words denoting animal sounds, vehicle sounds, sounds of voice, etc., come under onomatopoeia. For example, buzz, rustle, drip drop, beep, etc. There are 7 types of imagery, and I have selected examples of each type of imagery from my own poems. We will be dealing different types of imagery one by one. Number one, visual imagery. Visual imagery is related to the sense of sight. Through visual imagery, a poet describes color, shape, size, pattern, and visual scenes. In poetry, visual imagery is created by the use of simile, metaphor, or personification. Here is an example from my poem, Icicles, where memories are described. Scary memories attack like a python, crushing and squeezing, about to swallow me. In these lines, fearful memories are compared to a python. I have tried to bring out the horror through the image of the python because a python is the symbol of various negative things in life. Another example of visual imagery is from my poem, Derelict Clouds, where the clouds are depicted. Lonesome clouds, vagabonding about the empyrean sphere. Lonesome clouds, vagabonding about the empyrean sphere, like homeless children, helpless, hungry, weary, the derelicts. In these lines, clouds floating in the open sky have been compared to hungry and homeless children. I would like to add that in both the examples, there is the use of simile. Now, one example of metaphor from my poem, The Olive Tree. Your love, your love, a curved question mark in the Mediterranean of time. In these lines, love becomes synonymous with a question mark that is curved, and time becomes Mediterranean. Next, we come to auditory imagery. Auditory imagery is related with the reader's sense of hearing or sound. You can use such imagery in your poem for sound effect. It can denote pleasant sound, harsh sound, or even it can denote silence. For auditory image, you have to use the figure of speech called onomatopoeia. Just a line from my poem, Roots and Rains. The tapping of the rain becomes pitter patter. Here, the words tapping and pitter patter evoke the sound of falling rain. Next, we come to gustatory imagery. In gustatory imagery, you have to use words that is related to our taste buds, like sweetness, sourness, saltiness, or spiciness. A line from my poem, Once in a Blue Moon, will clarify the point. Just a single line I would quote. I breathed in the poignant, salty breath. In the line, the breath has been compared to sea waves, that is, salty in taste. Next, tactile imagery. Tactile imagery reaches out to our touch and evoke the feeling of touch. Tactile means something that is able to be touched. An image of tactile imagery from my ghazal. Susurrating like a soft silk, susurrate like a soft silk, love came at eventide. Here, the use of the word susurrate captures the softness of love and hence a tactile imagery. Now, we come to olfactory imagery. Olfactory means relating to the sense of smell. And hence, we use olfactory imagery to highlight the sense of odors, aromas, and sense in poetry. Olfactory imageries sometimes powerfully bring out memories and nostalgia. I quote a line from my poem, White Fog, where nostalgia is evoked by a particular smell. The slight smoky smell makes my nostril prickle with nostalgia. The moist touch unleashes a flood of memories, intense and striking. After a brief discussion on imagery and how we can create images in our poetry or poems, now we come to the fifth step of writing poetry, that is imagination. The famous quote by Albert Einstein that imagination is more important than knowledge highlights the importance of imagination in life. And we can well imagine the place of imagination in poetry. For writing poetry, you need a fertile imagination because imagination gives wings to your poetry. By imagination, we mean two things. Number one, the act or power of forming mental image of something that is not present. And number two, creative ability of a poet. Imagination enables us to enter the experiences of others and, if we wish, make that experience ours. Imagination generates images that are associated with feelings, passions, desires, and the likes. Romantic poets attached great importance to imagination, poetic imagination, and creative imagination. And truly, imagination, whatever may be its type, plays a great role in writing poetry. Imagination helps develop the subject of a poem, and without imagination, we can't create good and suitable imageries. Imagination, I have told you, was vital to the Romantic poets. It bodies forth the forms of things unknown and through the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and name. If there is one gift which makes Shakespeare different, is that of his imagination. The creative quality of Shakespeare's imagination makes him not of one age, but for all time. And next, number six, revision. Revision is a key part of the process of creative writing, including poetry. It is the final step of writing. By revision, you mean reading your poem or creative work again and again. By revising your work after writing the initial draft, you can improve your poem by correcting many things, such as grammar, spelling, punctuation, and usage. In fact, revision not only includes correction of grammatical errors and replacement of words and sentences, it includes much, much more. Believe me, revision can transform an ordinary piece of poem or writing into something memorable. Revision enables you to see your poem from a fresh perspective. If you are thinking about your first draft and want to make it better, I advise you to leave it alone for a few days. Take a break. The break will provide you to rethink about your poem and first draft. After break, come back to your poem again with a new thought and spirit. Read it many times to find errors, omissions, or things that require improvement. You will find a marked difference. And last but not least, read and practice. Finally, I would like to tell you that reading poetry does wonders for writing poetry. You must read the poems of classical poets like Shakespeare's and others, as well as the poems written by modern poets to get acquainted with a wide area of human experience and a rich variety of styles. Try to read a lot of poems and see how the reading blossoms into ideas you never know existed. It will also improve your poetic technique. Reading gives you inspiration and exposure, which you can incorporate in your own writing. It will also add to your vocabulary. And you know, rich vocabulary is the first step or backbone for effective communication in literature. So go on writing poem after poem, as it will widen your horizon and improve your craft and technique. Well, there can be no two opinions about the saying that practice makes a man perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy poetry writing. Best of luck.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, and we all enjoyed your session. And thank you for the invaluable suggestions you have given to our budding writers. You talked in detail of each and every aspect of poetry writing. You gave the steps of poetry writing. You talked about the different stanzas. You talked about the different emotions. You talked about imagination. Yes, and uh, different types of images. So I think it was a complete package. And the lovely poems, all your poems were so like the examples you gave from your poems were really, we enjoyed each and every type of poem. You are a versatile writer, and all the students have really enjoyed all your poems. And we would like to have, if you have links to your poems and writings, we can share your links with the viewers so that they can enjoy your poems, because right now we just got a taste of your writing, and now if we want to enjoy the books which you have written, the anthologies, we can just give them the link so that they can go through your writing and really enjoy all your poems. And yes, and all your poems do have a message, and they come out from your heart. We really enjoyed them. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation, ma'am, and being
Thank you
with us
so
here.
much.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much for giving me an opportunity to become the resource person of this session. Thank you, Dr. Manjushri, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, thank you.